Hey y'all, how are you doing? I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. It's me, Kim. I'm back for another video. So this is going to be a review / reflection on When They See Us. That's a new miniseries on Netflix directed by Ava DuVernay. And I gotta say, I have never had so many people ask me to talk about anything. Ever. So many people have asked me to talk about this miniseries. Or on the comments, in my DMs, on Twitter and Instagram, over on the Patreon, and emails. It's really been remarkable, and I've been trying to figure out why that is, because if you've seen it, and I assume that you're here because you've seen it, you know that this is not an easy watch at all. It's not particularly pleasurable. It is a wonderful watch. It is beautifully done, but it ain't fun. And so I've been trying to think through why. Like, the demand is so high. And I think because we're just looking for a kind of collective catharsis. Somebody on Twitter the other day told me that they have latched onto the word catharsis because I use it so frequently. And I do use it a lot, because I think that we are all in our lives, particularly if you're a marginalized person, looking for catharsis, looking for that release, because we have so much stress, anxiety, tension, trauma pent up, that we are all looking for some kind of outlet to let that stuff go. And some outlets are destructive and some outlets are productive. So I think that's why I use the word catharsis so much. And I do think that it is apt for why we would want to have somebody discuss this, because I was so upset. I was so upset. And I knew while watching it, I knew what was going to happen. I knew that they were going to get out, but I was so pained and upset and frustrated. And so now I feel really, I don't know, maybe honored that if you're coming here to get some sort of validation for your feelings, I got you, because we're going to go through it, because I am as pissed off as you are. I guarantee it. Maybe for the past 5 or 10 years, I've really learned a lot about this case and what these kids at the time were put through. But there's nothing that could have prepared me for this. And I think that's a real testament to Ava DuVernay. I don't have any real technical criticisms of this film. I think it is stunning. It is Ava's best work, and she's got a lot of good work. You know, in my last review, I said that I have a problem with the way that a certain, very famed, legendary director how he tries to preach to us. But I think that what we can get from this miniseries, the work that Ava DuVernay, even 13th, which is a straight documentary, is you can teach people things, but it doesn't have to feel preachy. Everything about this was great. The acting was wonderful. Those kids, they're teenagers, and now a couple of them are young adults, they're early 20s. Wonderful. I saw her tweet that she found the boy who plays Kevin Richardson in a Baltimore play. Jarrell Jerome is outstanding. They were wonderful individually. They were great as an ensemble. So great. And we got to see those performances shine because the filmmaking was solid. The pacing was good. The editing. We got to talk about the cinematography of this. Ava always works with this same cinematographer. His name is Bradford Young. Even in the most dire, horrific, soul-crushing circumstances, the Black people, even in this show, look ethereal. It was just a delight. It was really a delight to watch, despite the fact that I was mad, I cried, I was upset, I was outraged. So we're gonna talk about it. I will say, just for time purposes, I can't go through every single plot beat, you know? I just can't, because then we'd be sitting here for 90 minutes and, you know, I don't have a desire to do that. But I am going to highlight the things that stuck out for me and go through the notes that I took while I was watching. I always watch everything twice, so we'll just get through it. And I'm gonna be honest with you, by the end of this, I'm gonna be mad. I just know, right? We're gonna do a slow crescendo. This video gonna be about 45 minutes. And around minute 35, my prediction is we gonna be up here. So I thought it was really effective opening this film, this mini-series, with the different scenes of the 5 boys just being kids. They're teenagers. They're 14, 15, 16. Just being kids. So Kevin plays the trumpet. Yusuf is just a little smarty pants with a smarty pants chocolate drop with a high top fade. Korey is skipping school and hanging out with his boo. Raymond is another little cutie talking about being with girls. Antron is kicking it with his dad, talking about some sport. I can't remember. Baseball, basketball. I don't know sports, so I can't remember. But they're hanging out, eating, talking about sports, right? These are children. I think it's important for that to be in the forefront of our minds. They go out to Central Park, they get into trouble, the police come. I think another important thing that is established early on is that the relationship between these kids and the police is not a good one. But we also establish in that Central Park scene the kind of violence that the police are completely comfortable engaging in when a police officer tackles Kevin to the ground and hits him in the head with his helmet. One thing that was really difficult for me to get over, and something that I still can't completely comprehend, even though I know it happened, is the fact that there were 25 to 35 people in the park that day, and the police rounded up a handful of people, and Linda Fairstein, who is the villain of this series, along with Elizabeth Lederer. Let's not let Elizabeth Lederer off the hook. And Linda Fairstein is completely comfortable saying all the black and brown kids uptown are suspects. I know that to be true, right? I know this. It's still mind-boggling. And then the idea that Yusuf and Korey knew each other. The only reason why Korey was apprehended is because he decided to join Yusuf to go down to the police station. But the rest of these kids were not friends, right? It could have been anybody. That's what's so horrifying about this. How did you choose? After Linda Fairstein has decided, despite the fact that there is no physical evidence, the timelines don't match up, the boys' stories don't match up, their confessions are completely coerced, but she's decided that these are the people that she's going to pursue. There was a little bit in there about wilding. So there's a section where Linda Fairstein talks about wilding, and then that, wilding is repeated over and over again in the news reports, on the papers and all that. And that is supposed to describe the behavior that this rowdy pack of black and brown teenagers were engaged in. Wilding. They're rapists. They're wild, right? And if you're a black person, they're talking about wilding. They're wildin', right? There's an actual show now called Wildin' Out, right? But the white people in power do not know what that means. And so instead of actually doing any kind of work to figure out what that means, put it in the proper context, they just make something up. And for me, what that really brought up was in 2019, the rate of cultural appropriation, the dissemination of Black cultural vernacular and aesthetics is like lightning fast. I mean, it happens in the speed of a tweet. But I remember the days when it took longer. I remember even like bling bling, when it's like late 90s, early 2000, maybe like 98 to 2000. Where like for a while, bling bling was just something black folks say, every time we come around the city, right? Then I remember how bling bling slowly made its way into the mainstream vernacular. And then after a while, after it makes its way from the young people, then it gets to the old people, and then it becomes a parody of itself. Now, that stuff happens so, like woke, for example, right? The speed at which woke became like a thing that we earnestly said to each other to a parody of it, it's so fast. But what I wanted to say about it is Black people who have lots of interactions with white people in particular have to know about white vernacular and white mores and white cultural forms in order to survive. We do not have a choice. But generally, white folks only engage with Black cultural forms to appropriate it, to parody it, or to use it for a nefarious reason to criminalize us, to marginalize us. And when it comes to the misinterpretation of wilding as it was applied to those kids, that's not an accident. That's not an accident. If somebody wanted to learn what wilding was, all you have to do is ask the kids, approach them earnestly. Somebody would have explained it, but they didn't want to know. Right? When you see Black cultural forms and you've already made it up in your mind that they are attached to deviance or criminality, all you got to do is feign ignorance. You get to claim ignorance and use that ignorance to your benefit. That's what happened to those kids. All this stuff was set up to trap them. There was no way they could be anything other than dangerous criminals. I'm rereading this book, Feminism is for Everybody, a book by Bell Hooks, one of my favorite books. And in it, she talks about how, in the chapter on race and gender, it's a really great book, easy read, highly suggested. But in the chapter on race and gender, Bell Hooks talks about how white women feign ignorance on race and racism in order to continually occupy a victim position, right? If you pretend like you don't know what it is or what it means or what the consequences are, then you get to continually maintain your power because you don't have to do anything. And when we say, oh, you're hurting us, then you get to play victim. Oh, I didn't know. You knew. You did know. A lot of Black people have a real difficult time with appropriation because it's not just about sharing. It's about using the stuff that we made to reinscribe the power that you didn't earn. That was a tangent. I'm sorry. We got to get through this. Please instruct your children, your family, your friends, yourself maybe. Hopefully we know this now. Do not speak to the police. Just don't do it. It will not help you. If there's not a lawyer present, do not do it. It will only hurt you. It will not help you. We all think that we are so smart that we can talk ourselves out of anything. No, you can't. Also, do not allow the police into your home without a warrant. Do not allow the police to search your car unless there is probable cause. Sometimes they will use dogs to assert probable cause, but if ain't no dog there, no. You have to have probable cause to do searches and seizures, otherwise they're illegal. The kind of emotional manipulation that they were putting these children through is unconscionable. They abused these children. They abused them physically and psychologically. And that was really difficult for me to watch. I hope we all find it disgusting and horrifying to think of children being abused in that way, but it was hard. That first episode was so difficult to watch. They were being interrogated for 12, 14, 20, 30 hours. No bathroom breaks, no sleep. Another thing that was just so heartbreaking about watching this is, I believe, for the vast majority of parents, that they are deeply invested in doing what's right for their children and doing what's best for their children. And sometimes you just don't know. You can't do better if you don't know better. And it was so heartbreaking to see Antron's father be so susceptible to the corruption of the police system because he didn't know better or because he himself was vulnerable.
Look, when the police want what they want, they will do anything. Do you hear me? Anything.
There's a scene in part 2 of this, that's the trial episode, where Antron and his father are having some tension because Antron's father did get him into some shit, right? And it's not his fault, right? I'm not blaming the parents because, like we saw with Yusuf's mother, it didn't even matter. It did not even matter that Yusuf did not sit down to be interviewed. He still got locked up. What we saw in part 2 was Antron's father on the stand being questioned by Elizabeth Lederer. And look, you know, I don't believe in dragging, but I do believe in justice, okay? And what's happening to Linda Fairstein right now? Oh, well, girl, that to me is justice. You've had 30 years to live a great life. It's time. And so I feel like that boomerang needs to come right back on around for Elizabeth Lederer too. But we saw Elizabeth Lederer say to Antron's father, did you really think that after your son admitted to taking part in a gang rape that we were just gonna let him go? And Antron's father says, yeah, I did. And you believe him. I completely understand Antron being mad at his father. I understand the feeling of abandonment that he might have experienced or betrayal that he might have experienced in thinking that his father wasn't 100% on his side. But what we really see in this series is it didn't matter. It didn't matter what you did. The interrogation scenes of this film were very well constructed. The way that they were edited, shots of faces, shots of kids being slammed on the table, on a wall, on the floor. I mean, it was so evocative. I know that there are people out there who are in denial about how fundamentally corrupt this system is, but I am anti-police, prison, and prosecutor because I do not think that this system can be reformed. I think that it was created to be this corrupt. And when we see the process, even if it's fictionalized, right? When we see the process of adult grown men coercing false confessions out of children, I don't know how you can't think that something is fundamentally wrong. And that's not something that stopped in 1989. It still happens. Police continue to coerce false confessions out of suspects as a matter of practice. And I do think that we have to dismantle these systems because bad things happen, right? What happened to Patricia Miley is unthinkably horrific. She suffered a life-altering trauma. And we should be mad about that, and we can be angry about that. But the thing is, as a culture and as a society, we don't know how to use anger productively. All we know is go straight to lynching. How can you trust a society that is still so bogged down by inequality and only knows justice through the lens of how much you can hurt someone else? How can you trust them with a system that regularly ensnares disproportionately Black people, brown people, poor people? That's your justice system. I love John Leguizamo. I've loved him for so long, ever since I was a kid, sneaking to watch his one-man show on HBO. I don't remember what it was called, something with the word freak in it. But he's wonderful, and he was so good in this. I appreciated episode 1 enormously because what it did was highlight the depth of the corruption of this system. And I think we need to be very honest about what happened. I cried in the last scene of episode 1 when all the boys come together, with the exception of Korey. He's not there yet. But the 4 boys come together and they're talking to each other and they have that moment of truth where they have been interrogated in the harshest way. They've been forced into saying things that are completely untrue. A lot of them were introduced to the idea of rape via their coercive interrogations. Horrifying. And so when they come together to say, I lied, and they're all apologizing to each other for lying, that's the only moment of truth that we have in the past 45 minutes. I cried. And I cried in anticipation of knowing that these children's innocence was going to be stolen. Let's move on to episode 2. Donald Trump is disgusting. He is a racist. He is an opportunist. When I was watching this, all I could think about was the number of Black men who voted for Donald Trump in 2016. It actually was higher than the number of Black men who voted for Mitt Romney in 2012. And all y'all are clowns. If you know a Black man who voted for Donald Trump, please tell him he's a clown. Text him right now. Tweet him right now. He's a clown. Donald Trump used this case as another opportunity to get some airtime, to get his name out there, to brand himself. He took out full-page ads in the New York Post or the New York Daily News, one of those little trash rags, and they cost $85,000. I decided to do a little math. $85,000 in 1989 is $172,000 in 2019 dollars. Let's also use this as an opportunity to point out that the cash bail system is stupid. So early on, before the trial begins, a few of them are imprisoned. I think the only person who is not locked up is Yusuf because he has been bailed out. But really think about how ridiculous the cash bail system is if they are all being charged with the same kinds of crimes, not exactly the same crimes, but the same kinds of crimes. The difference between being in jail before your trial and out of jail before your trial is you could scrounge up some money. Doesn't make sense. This is also a good time to point out that forensic science is not real science. It's fake news. We have DNA now, that's good, but most of forensic science is just complete bullshit. There have been so many exposés over the years that point this out. Arson investigations, complete bullshit. Ballistics, bullshit. Hair analysis, bullshit. You're locking people up over stuff that has been debunked. Still, to this day, and in 1989, it was even worse. Can you imagine being at the mercy of forensic science from 1989? They didn't even have Super NES, okay? They just had the regular Nintendo. And y'all try to talk to me about some hair analysis. Get out of here. I knew that there was no physical evidence linking any of these boys to Patricia Miley's crime or the crime perpetrated against Patricia Miley. I knew that. What I did not know until I watched this was that there was actually a sock left at the crime scene that had, I guess, semen in it, some kind of DNA evidence from the attacker, and that DNA evidence excluded those boys. Not only that, but they were trying to hide that evidence because they knew it weakened their case. But I gotta say that exculpatory evidence, evidence that has the potential to exonerate a defendant, is withheld by prosecutors all the time. I was just reading about this. I'm anti-prison, anti-prosecutor, anti-police. I don't expect those things to be gone anytime soon. It's probably not gonna happen. But what I do hope that things like this miniseries do and these conversations do is help us to move toward a collective consciousness that does not assume that people with the most power are acting in good faith, that they are acting in defense of justice, because that's often not what that is. And it was such a good thing to slip in there, that interaction between Elizabeth Lederer and one of the defense attorneys. I can't remember what his name was, but the white one, played by Josh Jackson Pacey. And they are, to the side after it's discovered that they have this sock with DNA that does not match any of the boys. And Elizabeth, who is an assistant district attorney, says, this is not about justice.
It's no longer about justice, counselor. It's about politics. And politics is about survival. And there's nothing fair about survival.
Another testament to the filmmaking of episode 2 in particular, that trial episode, was, we all know how it's going to end. We know that these kids end up in jail. We know that they're convicted. But there was still a sense of drama and suspense, particularly around that sock debacle. When Josh Jackson's character finds out about the sock and he's thinking on his feet and he gets whoever that is, the medical examiner, whoever that person was on the stand, he gets him to say that the DNA does not match the DNA of the boys. And as a viewer, you're like, this is wonderful. This is a great reveal. There's some hope. The fact that I can still feel like, feel that with the family members and with the jury, even though I know that it's not going to matter, that's good filmmaking. Another thing that episode 2 brought up for me was after that interaction between, I can't remember what his name was. I'm going to call him Attorney Pacey, the white defense attorney, and Elizabeth Lederer. She explicitly says that this is about politics. This is not about justice. But it made me think again about how, despite the fact that they had nothing, no physical evidence, no eyewitness testimony even, because Trisha Miley had no recollection of what happened to her. They were going to continue marching on. And when they knew they had nothing, they offered a deal. And that is still so common. 95% of cases in our justice system end in plea deals, just to get it over with. Okay, let's go back to some filmmaking stuff real fast. The pacing of this show is wonderful. There was so much stuff to get through. You have 5 people, 5 backstories, 5 lives. So we're trying to balance all of that stuff and their families. And then we've got to get through, 25 years of that. But I never felt like we were rushing through things. I never felt like critical information was being left out. I learned more from this. I've seen documentaries. I've read articles. I learned stuff here. That's a testament to the editing, to the filmmaking, to the writing. But also, I thought the use of music in this series was brilliant. The mix of that timely soundtrack, the rap and then the R&B, but also just classical music, that score, so well done. And that score mixed with the editing and the shots of just faces. Oh, that's another thing that Ava and Barry Jenkins have in common. Just looking at faces, looking at these little kids' eyes. It's so moving. There's a lot of slow motion used in this series, and it makes some of the most heartbreaking moments feel like a dream. The moment when the boys are walked out of the precinct into the police cars, the squad cars, when they're all walking in slow motion, oh, heartbreaking. The moment at the end of episode 2 where they've been convicted and everything's moving in slow motion, where it's almost like we're feeling what they're feeling, right? Their lives have been ended, essentially. Another thing about the cinematography that I really liked, and I noticed it in episode 2, and then I really got it in episode 3, was the way that there are so many shots in this series where the only thing in a frame that's in focus is the actual performer, the actor. And so you get these beautiful brown bodies, you know, sitting in a chair or a close-up of their face, and they're in focus, and then everything else around is in soft focus. It's all hazy. And then maybe you see like a light refracting, you know, it's just so nice to look at. That soft focus really makes us concentrate on the characters in this story, on who they are. You know, these are not just numbers in the system. You know, they're not just inmates. These are real people. In episode 3, all the boys are released except for Korey, and we get to see their backstories. I thought Antron's mom, a saint. You know, men get old and broken down and sick and tired and then want to act right. Very typical. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is a really serious miniseries, and like we're talking about injustice and inequality and all that. But Adult Raymond? Okay, that's all we're gonna give it. You know, we're not gonna linger. That's all we're gonna give it. But if you know, you know, okay? We've talked about the child actors, but now it's time to give some props to the women. The mothers in this film were so good. The woman who played Yusuf's mom was great. Niecy Nash, you know, I think Niecy Nash gets pushed into a particular type of role because she is a fox. Like, you know, like she's stacked. But she's a really, really good and capable actress. I thought she did a wonderful job here. Just all of the parents in this film did really great. Episode 3 did a really good job of highlighting the stigma and the obstacles that formerly incarcerated people face. So a thing that I thought was really good was while they were incarcerated, Yusuf's mom talked about how even she was feeling the stigma, right? She didn't even do anything, but she couldn't find a job because of who her child was. That is how far the stigma of incarceration reaches in our society. And when you have millions of people incarcerated, how many people are affected? When she just talked about just the cost of calls, right? She said, $20 for 10 minutes. Those little details are telling us a lot. And then when the young men are released and they are going through the things that now they can't do, when Yusuf gets that haircut and he says, oh, I want to be a teacher, I want to do this, I want to do that. And the barber says, you can't do any of that now. You're a felon. You cannot get anything that has to be certified from the state. A wonderful teaching moment. And it's like, that's a real conversation that somebody would actually have, but that is also a way to fit in that information. So then we understand that not only have these boys been falsely imprisoned, unjustly incarcerated, but the rest of their lives are looking very bleak because of the lasting stigma that we attach to incarceration, right? We don't have a system or a society that says, oh, you went to jail, you served your time. I think Yusuf even got a degree while he was in prison. We don't have a system that says, oh, okay, well, come back and be a productive member of society. We have a system that says, oh, you went to jail as a child? Okay, well, have fun not being able to do anything for the rest of your life. I didn't look this up, but the person who plays Kevin and the person who plays his sister look real life related. Are they siblings in real life? Because don't they look alike? But I love the moment where she came and visited Kevin, and we had that moment with her where she's talking about how she was having difficulty letting go of the guilt that she felt for signing his confession. And she was denying herself pleasure because she was like, I'm here too. And so that little vignette with The man who comes in and rents a car, first of all, that was an attractive man. But the outcome of that story being, you've got to have something to look forward to. You've got to have hope. I thought that was such a sweet message in the middle of the worst imaginable situation. That sex scene with Raymond and his girlfriend, and they're doing it in his friend's apartment. The fact that the soundtrack to that sex scene was Cupid by 112, ooh, that did my heart so good. My little millennial heart was just filled with joy. It was just so cute to me. At this point, Raymond is in his early 20s. They're all in their early 20s, and Raymond is having a hard time keeping a job, and he decides to sell drugs because his home situation is just untenable. And by the way, Dasha Polanco did a great job of being just a horrible, evil woman. Very convincing, and I love her anyway. Too bad nobody watches Orange is the New Black anymore because she's great. But, and I also loved her in Russian Doll. Ooh, so good. Anyways, Raymond's home situation isn't working and he needs money and he needs to get out, so he decides to start selling drugs. And like, we're supposed to be mad at him or disappointed or something. I mean, that's not the vibe that I was getting from the storytelling, but just like intellectually, you're like, oh, Raymond, like, get your life back on track. But you know what I thought? We're coming off of this news cycle where we're celebrating Jay-Z for being the first hip-hop billionaire, even though, you know, people are starving, so billionaires don't really need to exist. But okay, I get it. I get the celebration. But, you know, as intellectually, I'm like, oh, Raymond, like, don't sell drugs. I also thought, you know who else sold drugs? Jay-Z. So, like, yeah, it's bad and it's disgusting and you're hurting people. But on the other hand, we have a lot of grace for drug dealers in our society, so I just couldn't be too mad at Raymond about that. Okay, let's move on to episode 4. Episode 4 was all about Korey Wise, and man, Jarrell Jerome is so good in this role. Okay, so if we remember, the only reason why Korey even got wrapped up in this is because he decided that Yusuf couldn't go down to the precinct by himself. That's the only reason. And what's so sad is Korey at 16 years old went straight to adult prison. And according to what we see in this miniseries, his experience was hell. So not only is the 16-year-old being sent to adult prison, a hellhole like Rikers Island, but he has learning disabilities. And they played up during the trial that Korey used to skip a lot of school, but of course, there's no attention paid or inquiry made into why he was skipping school. What really differentiates episode 4, the episode that centers Korey's story, is how violent it is. This kid was subject to so much violence, and often with the guards just turning a blind eye, with the medical professionals turning a blind eye. And I had a little question. Hopefully somebody in the comments can explain it for me. When the guard was saying to Korey and another inmate, "What can you do for me?" I feel like I know what he was referring to, but I wasn't 100% sure. So if y'all could explain for me what exactly that means, that would be great. And what we really understand in that episode is everyone is complicit. So this kid just suffers. Connection is so important. We see Korey over and over again talk about how much he just wants to stay connected. You know, his mom seems like not the best parent, but that's still his mother. So he wants to see her. And there are deep psychological effects to loneliness, to isolation. Another thing I have to celebrate this series for is the integration of that trans story. Isis King plays Korey's sister, and if somebody else had made this film, I can absolutely imagine another director just leaving that part out. Completely cutting it out. It's too messy. It's too controversial. They don't know what to do with it, so they would just avoid it. I love that Ava did not do that. We have to contend with that trans storyline, the violence that a trans woman endures, the kinds of alienation that trans people endure from their families. I love that. And that was a pretty quick little storyline, but it was so effective. And episode 4 is where we get our resolution. The real rapist, Mateus Reyes, comes forward. He gets his DNA tested. Surprise, surprise, it's a match. He was a serial rapist, and he was actually imprisoned for a gruesome murder. Do not look up that murder. And I just want to clarify, when I say abolish prisons, which I do believe. That doesn't mean that I think that people like Mateus Reyes just need to be out here. I believe that the way that we are caging people who cannot live among the rest of us for whatever reason is wrong. So we got to figure out something else. Reyes comes forward. They do the DNA testing. It's a match. I thought the interactions between that homicide detective and the people responsible for coercing those confessions and the people responsible for prosecuting that case was really interesting. It does typify the kinds of denial, willful denial that these people are in. Do I think that Linda Fairstein and the people who beat up those children and got those forced confessions out of them, do I think that they believe in their hearts that those children were responsible for that crime? Maybe. It's possible. But that's not really the point, because we can convince ourselves of anything. I know people who don't believe in evolution, right? Like, we can convince ourselves that anything is true. That's not the point. The point is that our justice system cannot be predicated on hunches, on guesses, on gut feelings. So we get to the end. We know the story. They're exonerated. They do get their triumphant moment of victory. But honestly, after, I don't know how many hours, more than 4, because each episode is more than an hour long. But after, I don't know, 5 hours of this, you can't even feel good. You know, you don't feel triumphant. You know, I'm happy for them, certainly. But you still feel beat down, because you know what they lost. And $41 million is not enough to give them back what they lost. It's not enough money, personally. They got $1 million for every year that they were incarcerated. Not enough money. I mean, I'm glad that they don't have to work and they don't have to deal with all that stuff. And it's even remarkable to me that, like, Korey Wise endowed a program at the University of Colorado that deals with exonerating people who are innocent. Like, the way that they've even used their money is inspirational, but I don't feel good. I ended this feeling angry. These kids' lives were ruined. Korey Wise was incarcerated at 16. He was released at age 30. I'm 30 years old now. I cannot imagine. I can't imagine, and it's not right. This is by far Ava's best work. She just put everything in it. Just all of the heart and the soul and the work really came through. As angry as I am at everyone involved in incarcerating those children, I'm so glad that this was made. I'm so glad, you know, the Ken Burns' Central Park 5 documentary came out in 2012, 2013. That was illuminating. But I felt like there is something special about a dramatization where we get to feel the heart and the soul of it and make it be artful and beautiful. You know, it's devastating, but it's still gorgeous. And I appreciate that. You know, Ida B. Wells said, "Those who do the murders write the reports." I'm so glad that via a vehicle like this, that the actual victims of the crime, of the corruption, of the injustice, get an opportunity to tell their stories in a way that pleases them. It doesn't happen a lot, and it certainly doesn't happen a lot on this scale. Nobody has to convince me that our justice system sucks. I'm there, okay? But I do hope that people who are on the fence, particularly the people with the most power, white folks, rich folks, I do hope that they are watching this and they understand what fear and anger can do. Because neither our fears or our anger are unbiased. And that is the foundation of our legal system. Our current system exploits those biases. This entire miniseries was so painful. It was painful to watch. It was painful to experience vicariously, but I am very glad I did. If you have any questions about why I feel the way I do about policing, about prisons, about prosecution, then I can just point you to this. Because this says it all for me. Have we accepted that there are certain lives that we're willing to sacrifice as collateral damage? I'm not willing to do it. The same way that I'm just not going to say, oh, I accept that there's a potential that I'm going to be gunned down every time I exit my home. I feel like we've accepted the same stance toward gun violence where we say, oh, well, it's just inevitable. Some people are just going to die. I don't accept that. I'm sorry. This is the last thing I'm going to say about this. There was absolutely no forensic evidence attaching those 5 boys to this crime. They did the DNA testing. It matched Reyes. There was no eyewitness testimony. Trisha Miley does not remember. She has no recollection of what happened that night. These men were exonerated. The city of New York paid them a record settlement. There is no question about whether or not they were involved. So when I see conservatives like Candace Owens, for example, continue to say that they are not innocent, I am disgusted. To use your platform to defame them in defense of Donald Trump? What's wrong with you? And I saw someone on CNN do this too. To needlessly drag those men into that? What is wrong with these people? And then people want to ask me why I think conservatism is evil. That's why ignoring the mountain of evidence, all the facts that we have in order to continue to criminalize those men is not about safety. And when we see people doing that stuff, we get why the incarceration of Black and brown people in this country continues at the rate that it does, because it's not about facts. It's about political expediency. Anyways, that's all I have to say about that, you guys. That was an extraordinarily difficult thing to watch. I'm glad that we can come together to discuss it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Ava DuVernay, wow. Wow. Bradford Young, wow. I'm in awe of people who are that talented. That was such a gift to us, but honestly, such a gift to them. I'm so glad that those men got that. I really, really am. Up on Patreon right now. I've made a ton of new content. It's Patron Appreciation Month. Go over there and check it out. I made a video about my worst breakup, which was really a shit show, and what happened and how I got through that. I made a video about how I manage my anxiety, a couple of techniques that I've learned over the years. I've recorded a few podcasts. So anyway, go over there, take a look. Thank you so much to all the patrons. I deeply, deeply appreciate you. Sign up for the email newsletter, buy some merch, leave a comment, find me on Instagram or Twitter. I will see you next time, guys. Bye.